Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lori Ensignat, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at IEC, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for how to create a thriving ideation process in your business with Todd Hart of Graybar. And welcome to Todd. We're very happy to have you and look forward to a great presentation. Todd joined Graybar 3 years ago as director of its innovation lab on the campus of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. In his current role, he leads a team of project managers, designers, researchers, and developers in vetting new ideas and emerging technologies to better serve existing and new customer markets. Todd brings a fresh perspective to Graybar and the industry. And with that said, Todd, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a quick sound check. Everything okay? I guess it is. So, well, it's great to be here this afternoon. And I'm excited about this topic. I hope the folks that are dialing in are also excited. So I guess just to kind of kick things off here, the EC marketplace is becoming highly competitive. It's always been competitive, but I think as more technology enters that particular space, it's becoming even more competitive. And my hope is that the practicality of this presentation allows you to start your own innovation or ideation process in your organization. And I tend to use those terms interchangeably, ideation and innovation. Sometimes I find that using ideation or moving an idea through a maturation process, sometimes I find that using that particular term tends to put people at ease a little more. Sometimes innovation can mean my job is going away to some people. So feel free to use whatever course you're comfortable with, but that's a little bit of thinking behind that word ideation. Just to kind of kick things off, fundamentally, innovation means, well, it probably means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'll kind of explain what it means to me. I see innovation as introducing something new and valuable into your business. It could be, something that improves productivity or profitability. It could be reducing cost within your organization. It could be being more competitive, maybe building the value of your brand, establishing new partnerships, relationships. So really just anything that adds value inside your organization. And I think on the flip side of that, businesses that fail to innovate really run the risk of several things. So losing market share to competitors, falling productivity and efficiency, losing key staff, folks that don't feel challenged within their work environment, experiencing steadily reducing margins and profit. Of course, margins are always important to us, both as an electrical contractor as well as a distributor in this space. And then lastly, and this sounds pretty awful, but going out of business is a risk of organizations that fail to innovate. So again, my hope is that through this presentation, you'll be able to take some nuggets and apply them to your business. So let's jump in, and you'll have to bear with me. I'm trying to manage my notes here on the right and advancing slides here on the left. So hopefully this will go smoothly. But what we have here is basically what I call the EC Innovation Playbook. And really innovation, it's a little bit of a misnomer, because when people think about innovation, they tend to think about creativity and brainstorming and strategic thinking. And those are all great characteristics of innovation. But the other side of that coin, the flip of that coin, is innovation takes a tremendous amount of discipline and rigor in the process. So the creativity and kind of that brainstorming and sort of open thinking, that comes at kind of the top of the funnel. but to truly move an idea through the process into, action, it takes a lot of, like I said, discipline and approach and rigor. And so this process is kind of a 5-step process. And again, I call it the Innovation Playbook. So, but it's very critical to not only understand the process, but again, understand the level of discipline in this process itself. So I'll talk in some detail about each of these, but just very briefly, collect and curate ideas is at the very beginning of the process. Then you move into what we call idea assessment and alignment. Third is discover and validate the need. And you'll notice that I underlined need there. That's really important. And you might substitute the word need for maybe opportunity, or discover and validate the problem that you're solving for. So, it's sort of spending time really kind of unpacking the pain points, the opportunity, again, the problem. The fourth step is creating and validating your solution. So, you might hear me talk about prototyping, or, even things like sketches on a notebook to help kind of figure out what that solution looks like is really helpful. So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, MVP, which in my world stands for a minimum viable product. And for those taking notes at home, you may want to jot that down. You can Google it. MVP, minimum viable product, is what that stands for. So creating an MVP, launching, and then making changes or iterating based on the feedback that you're getting. So, and as you think about this in the EC world, I'd like to position this process within the context of maybe entering a new niche. So for instance, maybe becoming a wireless systems integrator might be a way to sort of think about, how would I apply this playbook if I was thinking about, kind of moving into that particular niche as part of my business. So, all right, let's jump in. So the first step, is probably pretty intuitive, right? You have to have ideas, and ideas can come from many different sources. And I've got a couple of examples there on the left side of the screen. So customers clearly could be a source of ideas. And if you're not having consistent dialogue with customers, with end users, I would highly recommend it. My guess is most of you tuning in today, can really kind of speak about the voice of your customer. What are the opinions that you're hearing? What is their sort of sentiment around, the job that you're doing? But that's a critical piece of collecting ideas. So we call it VOC, voice of the customer. It's just kind of a phraseology there. And right below that, again, is another really great source of collecting ideas, and that's the voice of your employee. Kind of, I don't know if I should say gone are the days when you had, sort of a box in the office for suggestions. People would drop in, little 3x5 cards or whatever it might be. Honestly, that could still be a way of harvesting ideas. There are lots and lots of ways, and I'll talk about some of the idea management tools that are available in the market today to help kind of capture these ideas. Another area we call competitive intelligence, and that sounds super fancy. It doesn't have to be. Really, it's just understanding who your competition is, what they do well, and maybe what areas do you want to emulate what they do or what they do well. So, you might have one person in your office that spends a couple of hours a week, and I mean a week, not a lot of time, maybe just a couple of hours a week. Maybe they focus on one competitor. Maybe somebody else in the office is the next week or maybe the next month focuses on a different competitor, and gets back and kind of rallies the group together and shares what they found out. And then lastly, we use the phrase thought leadership, And again, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but I wrote down a couple of examples. IEC chapter meetings might be a really great way to glean ideas. Emerging technology articles, industry publications. I really want to encourage you to think about, how can I kind of expand my thinking around either my business today or where I see my business going into the future. So that thought leadership very well could be you, could be the folks on this call. So let's talk a little bit about the idea management tool. And one thing I don't want to do is certainly burden this group with a lot of technology and a lot of cost. So what I'll say about an idea management tool is it doesn't have to cost anything. So my guess is all of you have some type of software program. It might be Excel, it might be Google Sheets, some way of capturing these ideas. And so again, I don't recommend going out and purchasing a platform for idea management, and I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. But I do think that having some mechanism for capturing ideas is smart, and it gives you a chance to go back and look at ideas that were captured that maybe weren't implemented for whatever reason. But again, I would encourage you to think about something that you're using today. I threw out Excel, Google Sheets. There are some platforms if you want to get, really, sophisticated in your ideation and innovation process. There are some platforms that are available at no expense, and I'll just throw a couple out there. Innovation Cloud is one of the platforms. There's another called CrowdWorks, and that works is spelled WORX, CrowdWorks. But again, Google Sheets does a really good job of this as well. So another thing I mentioned on the right side there is, just a couple of questions to think about. So as you're collecting and curating ideas, does the idea have broad appeal? And does it have an idea owner? And many times the idea owner is the individual who submitted the idea. So in our organization, what we do is we have idea campaigns or idea challenges. That's definitely something you can explore in your organization. And basically what that means is it's a question or it's a topic. And basically you're asking for ideas as it relates to this particular area. Again, it might be back to the wireless systems integrator. The topic might be how could we, or what steps could we take to move closer to becoming a wireless systems integrator? That might open up all kinds of ideas. So, but it's good to know, does the idea have broad appeal, and does it have an owner? Does it have someone who really has a passion for the topic? Is it tactical or strategic? Why does that matter? Well, it matters because tactical ideas, short-term ideas, tend to be able to be implemented much more quickly than something more strategic. So it's just kind of good to know what you're kind of getting into. And then lastly, on the right there, do you have a parking lot for ideas? And I kind of touched on this earlier. Again, capture every idea that you possibly can, and then think about, okay, now how do I move that idea to the next step? So let's talk about that next step. We call this step idea assessment and alignment. And basically, again, there are a lot of ways to accomplish this. We use a couple of different tests internally. I also mentioned there on the slide that this particular stage or phase should take about 30 to 45 days. Again, if it's a tactical idea, probably less than that. But if it's a strategic idea, you want to spend the time needed to really assess it and ensure that it aligns with your business strategy. So let me talk a little bit about that market assessment, and I'll throw up a few questions here in the process. Actually, I'm going to jump to the third bullet. So strategic alignment test. I mentioned on the right side there, does the idea align with company strategy? You know, hopefully you have perhaps a 3-year, a 5-year, maybe a longer strategic look at your business. If that is the case, then that's probably the first, litmus test that you would want to think about as it pertains to, does this idea move on? And that's, does it align with your strategy? If it doesn't align, then that's a pretty good indication that the timing is not right for this particular idea. The other two areas, we talk about a market assessment and an ability to win test. Again, these don't have to be complicated. A market assessment test basically looks at the competition. So what is our competition doing in this space as it relates to this idea? What are they doing well? What are they not doing well? Another part of the market assessment gets into the growth of that particular market. Again, systems integrator. What is that market doing? Is it growing? Has it plateaued? Has it leveled off? So just understanding the market is important in assessing an idea to either move on or be placed in a parking lot. The second, I guess I should say the third test is the ability to win. And so what that looks like is, can we succeed in the market? So what would it take from a training perspective? What would it take from a technology perspective? What would it take from marketing and a sales perspective to make this a successful idea? So you have to think about that ability to win aspect. And I'll give you a for instance. If you have 20 let's say electricians, master electricians, and absolutely none of them have any experience in that wireless systems integration aspect, that's probably a pretty good indication that your ability to win in that space is going to be a challenge. That doesn't mean that you can't move through that challenge. It just means perhaps there's a better idea or a better concept that that you have a greater ability to win with. So I think you'll probably be provided these slides at some point. Any one of these terms that I've used, market assessment test, ability to win test, strategic alignment, these are all things that you can Google and probably find more information than you could possibly need. So so don't get caught up in the terminology. Most of this is pretty basic. So all right, so we've assessed our idea, we've aligned it, it aligns well with our strategy, and so we want to move forward. I'll say that discover and validate the need or the opportunity is probably, I think, one of the most critical phases or stages. And I'll tell you what happens many times with this particular stage is people tend to skip over it. And I've given this a lot of thought, and I guess where I've landed with this is they tend to skip over really discovering and validating the need or the opportunity. This is what you're solving for. I think many times we run right to the solution because we think, hey, I got this. I know how to figure this out. I know how to solve this. But I'll tell you that this stage, if you spend the time needed here, it will pay dividends as you move farther down the line. So here are some questions to think about. And what I recommend individuals do, owners, CEOs, managers, come up with a research plan. Again, Excel works well, Sheets works well, an 8x10 piece of paper works well. What do you want to research? So who do you want to talk with? What questions do you want to ask them? Who's responsible for that? What's the timeline involved? And so that's really the key piece of this particular stage is the research. And again, I would recommend maybe a small team of individuals collaborating on a particular concept if that's possible. But this stage, I mentioned there can take between 30 and 60 days. I think if you do your homework up front, again, really kind of flesh out what does that research plan look like and what questions do we want to better understand, then that will help, kind of move through that process. So some questions there on the right, just again, kind of some thought-provoking questions. But just to make, again, another plug for this, don't skip this stage. This is probably the most important stage, and that's really discovering, unpacking, and validating, again, what you're solving for, the need, the opportunity, the pain point, whatever it might be, okay? Okay. I think this is stage 4, if I'm not mistaken. So, so we've collected and we've curated ideas. We've matched them up with our strategy. We've spent time in the idea assessment. We've moved it into discovering and validating the need to check what we're solving for. And now we're kind of to the fun part. And the fun part is validating your solution. So there are lots of ways to validate your solution. I mentioned earlier that we spend some time developing prototypes. Again, those don't have to be complicated. A prototype might be using PowerPoint to maybe draft up a workflow, or if it's a digital solution, maybe it's a screen. Maybe it's a section of a mobile application. I realize these are probably for bigger firms. But again, a sketch in a notebook, sometimes just to kind of validate your solution, is all that's needed. So the question here really is about, is it technically feasible? Is it creating new value for our customers? And the very important question, is the solution that you've developed, is it desirable? So, as you socialize the solution to the problem that you validated earlier, as you socialize that both internally and externally, what are you hearing? Are folks excited about it? Do they stress or communicate that it's creating new value for them, or at least they could see it creating new value for them? And this phase takes a little bit more time. I think we have a window of 30 to 90 days. So again, if done right, creating and testing the solution, internally socializing it, externally socializing it, that can take a little bit of time. So another, again, just another reinforcement to spend the time needed to really validate your solution. I mentioned a sketch in a notebook. PowerPoint is a great way to help kind of, create and validate or test your solution. Google Slides works well if you are a Google user. And another one I'll throw out to the group, it's called Miro, and I'll spell that. It's M-I-R-O, Miro board. And basically Miro board is a free, I think they have a free version. And it's basically a digital whiteboard. And you can do just about anything you want. You can create workflows. You can create, what we call wireframes, which is kind of a digital rendering of an idea. It's a wonderful platform, and others can use it kind of at the same time to sort of co-create solutions. So Miro board is the name of that, M-I-R-O. That's an unpaid advertisement, by the way. So I think that is validating the solution. And so we are kind of coming in for a landing here. The last stage is launch. And so we've got some questions here. So let me step through these. So I talk about a minimum viable product. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. It might not be relevant to, to your business. we're fairly large as an organization, and so as we think about a launch, a product or a solution launch into the market, at times we will launch what's called a minimum viable product, which is just enough that the features and the functionality is there that we want, but maybe it's not the full-blown solution. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just kind of recognize what that is. It may or may not be relevant to to your idea. Another decision that happens in this last phase is actually the build, buy, or partner. And some solutions you might build internally. You might hire someone to build something for you, an app or whatever it might be. You might buy what you're thinking about in the marketplace. Again, it could be an app in the App Store. It could be, it could be something else. Maybe it's a website subscription, or perhaps partner on, on a solution. And again, I don't know exactly what that would look like for you. It might be partnering with a couple of other folks kind of in the same category as you. It just kind of depends. So you have a choice: build, buy, or partner. And this stage, again, it's a little longer, has a little longer tail to it, 30 to 90 days. The one thing I'll mention here is on the right side there are KPIs understood. KPIs are performance indicators. And as you launch your idea, again, it could be an internal idea, it could be an external idea, a customer-facing idea, but you want to think about, how do we track this? How do we make sure that that the key performance indicators are understood, and and it's something we can point to say, yes, this is successful, or no, this is not successful. We need to go back and maybe make some changes. So think about what those performance indicators might be. They could be, increased in sales, an increase in sales. They could be added profitability. They might be something like, employee engagement or employee retention. A performance indicator could be reducing customer churn, for instance. So those are all things to kind of think about. Yeah, so that's kind of the last stage. And again, based on your performance indicators, based on having conversations with your customers, think about iterating. So we call that a cycle. And you might kind of take that idea back, make a few changes, relaunch, and that's kind of what we mean by iterating on the idea. So okay, this is my last kind of formal slide, and then I think we've got plenty of time for questions. So these are just some key points that I wrote down, and you could probably come up with a lot more than this, but these are some kind of that came to my mind. So the first key point is really innovation is more about people, more about the process, and less about the technology or the platform. So I think sometimes people can get kind of stuck in that analysis paralysis phase, where they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, and I've got to have this really whiz bang technology to stand up an idea program or an innovation program. That's not the case. It's really about engaging the people, understanding the process that we just stepped through. And yes, having a platform or a piece of technology is needed, but it doesn't have to be a new purchase. Again, we talked about some of the solutions that you can use to capture ideas and kind of move them through the process. The second bullet point there, I think this is probably intuitive, but I wanted to mention it anyway. Leadership support and encouragement is absolutely critical. There's nothing that can shut down creativity and forward thinking and innovation. There's nothing that can shut that down quicker than a lack of leadership support. So make sure that encouragement is there. Give people a little bit of margin in their schedules to think about new ideas, new ways of doing things, perhaps new offerings, service offerings in the market, and then celebrate success. Pizza party, a little bit of time off, whatever that looks like for you. Make sure that you're intentional about celebrating success. The third bullet there, again, probably pretty intuitive. The construction industry is changing rapidly. We're seeing it in our business as a distributor. Our suppliers are seeing it. Our customers are seeing it. Whether it's in kind of the EC and construction space, or it's in the one of our other verticals, in industrial or utility. Construction or construction technology is rapidly changing the landscape of construction. So don't wait. Don't get left behind. Crawl, walk, run. I think we've all heard this analogy. Start by crawling. Start by launching an idea campaign. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It might be a whiteboard as people walk into your office. Maybe it's a question, maybe it's a topic, and then perhaps you have an Excel file that everyone can get access to, and people just start throwing ideas out there, and then you start selecting those ideas and voting on those ideas if you'd like. What I find is collaboration is critical to the success of ideation. I might think I have the best idea in the world, but I'll talk with Scott, and then we'll talk with Rebecca, and then maybe we'll pitch it to Bill, and all of a sudden that idea doesn't look anything like what I thought it did, but it's so much better. So think about that. And then the last thing is really just a sense of urgency. Start generating and capturing ideas today. I just really want to encourage the folks on this call. It's never too late until it's too late. And so if you're on this call, that's probably a pretty good sign that it's not too late. So take that one step, that kind of crawl step, and then think about how do I move from crawl to walk, and then from walk to run, and do it today. So with that, I'm not sure how we're doing on time.
We're doing great on time, Todd.
Okay. So did we have any questions come in during the talk?
We did, and I'd like to encourage the audience to add questions to the questions box if you'd like to, and we have time to answer those. So
yeah, we've got plenty of time.
But Todd, there was a question which you addressed to a certain extent, but maybe you could expand on it a bit.
Sure.
And the question is, do senior executives of a company need to participate in initial idea screening? And I think you said that was very important, but could you expand a little bit on that and maybe give some ideas about how to involve them effectively?
You bet. Yeah, and that's a great question. So, depending on the structure of your organization, and this might be a larger organization that this question comes from, it might not be as well, but I would say for most strategic ideas to see the light of day, they need sponsorship. They need some level of executive support, executive sponsorship. And, I think we all know that certain people have certain hot buttons, and other people have different hot buttons. And so I think sometimes being strategic in who that sponsorship is, or who that sponsor is important. And I think it's good to kind of share the wealth. So you might know that this individual is really passionate about this particular idea or concept, while this individual might not be as much. And so clearly, you want to make sure that alignment is appropriate. The short answer is absolutely. The longer answer is be more strategic in how you make that selection of sponsorship. So great question.
Thanks, Todd. So while we wait for more questions to come in, is there any questions that you typically get when you present this webinar that we haven't covered, or anything from the presentation that you'd like to expand on a little bit?
Yeah, let me go back through. One thing that I probably glossed over a little bit was, as part of the idea assessment, we use a tool called the business canvas model. And again, this is another one of those terms where you can just kind of Google it and find, this template. But it's good to have a uniform approach to, assessing and discussing ideas at your company. And, the business canvas model might be maybe a little too formal, which that's totally fine. Maybe there are aspects of that model, that canvas or that template that that you would want to select and say, okay, these are the three, these are the three different characteristics of an idea, or factors of an idea that we're going to discuss. And as long as there's some level of uniformity in those discussions, then you'll do well. I think some people get tripped up on, well, how do we establish, kind of a language of sorts, semantics or whatever you want to call it, and having that is important, because that starts to, it starts to sort of create a level of thinking and a uniform approach that probably wasn't there, beforehand. So, yeah, that was one thing that I think I maybe glossed over just a little bit.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
We don't have any more questions that have come in, I guess. Oh, wait, before I say that.
Okay.
For a big organization, would you recommend separate review committees for different market segments? How do we balance synergy and being lean when there are 30 to 40 ideas submitted per quarter?
Yeah. That's a tough one. So I'll explain how we do it, and this may or may not be the right answer for your organization. We have at Graybar, and of course we're a large organization, and we face the same type of challenge. We have different divisions, business units that face different challenges. We have an innovation council, and that council is comprised of a cross-disciplinary section of directors and VPs, or at least a senior VP. And on a monthly basis, we get together and do kind of just what I was talking about, kind of idea assessment and alignment. So the ideas have gone through kind of a collection and a curation stage before we get to that idea assessment and alignment. And we use a scorecard. We call it our market assessment scorecard. Again, you could Google it. And that scorecard kind of puts all of the ideas on a level playing field, because we look at the same factors: the market assessment, our ability to win in that space. So we tried to kind of mitigate that challenge through those techniques. I think if you have an abundance of ideas coming in, and there's kind of this tug of war that's happening, my idea is better than your idea, maybe it does make sense to, as part of your, collect and curate, maybe there's a filter, if an idea is specific to this particular business, part of the business, it goes here. If it's specific to this part of the business, it goes here. And then maybe you have kind of an innovation council, maybe it's a smaller council, 3 or 4 individuals within that particular business area that sort of sits in the front of that process, and kind of is used as a filter to move the idea forward. So it really just depends. I've seen it done both ways effectively. So I hope that gives you, a little bit to think about. It's a great question.
Thanks, Todd. That was great. No further questions have come in. So what I would like to do is give everybody a few minutes back in their schedule for
Okay.
today. And if you have any questions, please forward them to me, and I'll be sure that Todd receives them and he can respond to them. I'd like to thank the
Yeah.
audience for attending today. This was a great webinar, and thank you, Todd. It was very informative and really helpful.
Yeah,
And I
you're
hope that
welcome.
we can have you back on another
Yeah.
topic in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. My LinkedIn contact information's there. I'd love to hear how things are going for people. What's working, what's not working. I'm a student. I try to be a student of innovation. It's kind of what I do every day. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear from people, both good and bad. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure it'll all be good. I'm sure it'll all be good. But thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you. Thanks for presenting to IEC members today. And thank
You
you to
bet.
the audience. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.